Alfred Nobel was famous in his time for the development of dynamite.
He and his family were deeply involved in the weapon industry.
When he died in 1895, his will said that the Norwegian Parliament should give out the Nobel Peace Prize. It became the world's most prestigious prize.
The Nobel Prizes are a group of scientific prizes: physiology, chemistry and physics and medicine, literature and peace.
But Lutuli, the former Zulu chief whose life has been dedicated to the aim of peace.
The Nobel Peace Prize is a prize that is given by and is given to people all over the world in every age.
I have fought against white domination.
The terms of the will is to identify the person or persons who in the past year has done the most to promote peace congresses, reduce standing armies, or promote fraternity between nations.
Could you ever choose peace after they have broken you? Hold on to the hands of a nation's dreams and lead them into a promised land, but the promised land still doesn't belong to you. So at the end of a rainbow, you wonder, where do you plant your hopes when this earth is cracked and scorched? These days, it seems this land only bears fermented fruit. Dad.
Nelson Mandela and Jesus, you know them both very well.
That's Mandela. Wow, you know, this larger-than-life person who was real and so tall because we were also kids.
Nelson Mandela is a very worthy recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize.
The settlement of 1994 was imperfect.
In a way in which we got screwed, it started with that man.
It was intended to encourage South Africa to continue with that process.
Projects such as these exist to confuse us.
Any date to come?
Yeah.
Election days.
Well, that's the problem that is we are facing. Because the election is going to be very heavy. We have a big country where there is not much infrastructure. And we have to work hard there. And it's not going to be.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people. And I think the time has come for us to consider, in the light of our experiences in this stay at home, whether the methods which we have applied so far are adequate.
Already by 1955, it was clear that the regime had banned the Communist Party. It had banned individuals now, including the Mandelas, and it was now moving more and more in repression.
It was Sharpeville which shocked the world. It happened on Monday, March 21st, 1960. 69 natives were killed, 176 wounded.
This was the biggest single massacre. The whole country was shocked. This was a tremendous change because until then, the policy had been one of non-violence. Now we had to be deliberately, consciously violent.
When Sharpeville happens in 1960, a whole layer of political activists is taken out of townships. It was quite certain that the mass insurrections of people that came after Sharpeville, that whole push, it is arguable that that actually bent the chassis of the Afrikaner stand forever. After that moment, there was no way that they could rule with any degree of respectability.
Umkhonto then takes place. The South African government tried to paint the picture that all of us against apartheid are communists, that we are bloodthirsty.
Mandela and others now formed the underground resistance, Umkhonto Wesizwe, Spear of the Nation. Ultimately, in 1964, he and other leaders of Umkhonto were charged with sabotage and revolution. But the government intended no return. The accused were sentenced to prison for life.
When you think about the Rivonia trial, right? Of course, he was arrested with his comrades, but again, it is him who stands out. He gives a speech, the Rivonia trial speech, which was made popular, where he says, I have fought against white domination. I fought against black domination. But when he says black domination, something in you just has to stop and pause. Black domination, where, how? And the fact that that speech is published and continues to be popularized without being questioned, especially around the idea of black domination. What does that mean? He's putting the colonizer and the colonized under one pedestal, and he's saying that these two people are the same. So this is as early as 1964.
He gets sentenced to life in Rivonia trial. I arrive in Robben Island, hot-headed young man. The only thing in my head is I want to escape. Madiba want to take me under their wing.
While plans to escape is always the part and parcel of the life of a prisoner, those plans were always in considerations, both when I was in Johannesburg jail. In fact, that is the place where I almost escaped. And it was not so easy in Robben Island because of the sea around and because of the fate of those who wanted to escape.
There were 30 of us. They made us walk in rows of 4 in a column, walking in front, on our sides, and at the back, white warders, all armed. And they are shouting at us, Hak, because Hak is like you talk to cattle. And the message comes, walk slowly. I realize there's a message coming from Madiba. He's somewhere in the middle of the 30. I look around, I see Madiba slowly walking through the column till he reaches the front. And he reaches the front and he slows down all of us. The warders keep screaming, we don't say a word, we just walk slowly. He knew that if on that first day we didn't set the rules, that system would crush us.
The tipping point is the point at which people refuse to be governed, and that there are more people willing to go to jail than there are people who are afraid. That tipping point came a few times. The 1970s were a time of extreme state control. I think, if you like, they think of it as a time of grand apartheid, when the Afrikaners were in complete control of movement of people in and out of ghettos, where people went to school, what they studied at schools, and the Boers were in control. The skies are assaulted by helicopters. There are police in the township. You see school children leaving the country in great numbers. Swaziland, Botswana, Lesotho, and many of them actually, they revive the exiled organizations.
Each day, more and more people arrive from South Africa to join the ANC in an exodus that has been going on since Mbeki and the others fled.
The citizens are now more awake to the fact that this thing can be challenged. It's only until the mid-80s that you find the rise of COSAS in schools, in the adoption of the Freedom Charter, and the creation of the United Democratic Front as a mass movement. And then you find that a lot of student, youth organizations, church organizations, different formations begin to form around this idea of a mass democratic movement, which is largely behind the idea of the people shall govern.
What are you singing about? Tell me, what is this about? What is the song about?
Mandela. There's one man we all respect, and we take him high. We call him our father, none other than Nelson Mandela. If and only if that man can be released, and then we can see the direction of South Africa.
Why Nelson Mandela?
Nelson Mandela is the father of, say, the revolution of the black man in South Africa.
I arrived at NIS, the intelligence service of our country, in 1980, and within 2-3 years it was very clear to me we have two options. We fight till the bitter end, whatever that would mean, or let's start talking to each other and try to find a settlement in some way or another. PW, he instructed me, Dr. Barnard, we cannot go on like this. Start talking to Mr. Mandela and see whether it's possible to find a settlement with these people in which, and that's the crucial point, minorities, including Afrikaner white minorities, will be protected in a new dispensation.
Madiba was given offers to be released from prison. The first one was that he would be released and sent to the Transkei.
I am in prison as the representative of the people and of your organization, the African National Congress, which was banned. What freedom am I being offered whilst the organization of the people remains banned? I cherish my own freedom dearly, but I care even more for your freedom.
Honourable members will be aware that I made an offer last year which could have set Mr. Nelson Mandela free. Mr. Mandela is therefore, in effect, being jailed by the South African Communist Party and its affiliate, the African National Congress. For obvious reasons, it suits them that he remains in prison.
PW played a much more crucial role in finding the settlement than F.W. de Klerk. He arrived on the scene when the table was laid and he started enjoying the Moet Chandon champagne from there on. The difficult period was to get each and every one at the table.
It was in Victor Verster that I consulted my colleagues outside, both in prison and outside prison, on the question of negotiations.
During his trial, I followed it closely and felt that he had a fair trial. And then I constantly took note as protests started to mount about his incarceration. And as he became an international figure, as he became, even while in jail, an icon, I took note of all that.
Remember now you have generations of people in prison. You have the world aware of that. They had to be placed under pressure by their citizens to actually oppose apartheid and to actually impose sanctions on apartheid.
Had led to a situation where investments were being withdrawn from South Africa. Money was flowing out. And South Africa was desperately trying to get its Western powers to reverse that trend.
The extent to which these ideas were supported by Democrats, both inside and outside the country, was a source of tremendous inspiration and brought us happiness to know that the efforts of the regime to isolate us and to make us forgotten by the people outside had completely failed.
I was quietly informed, and I followed it with interest, about the exploratory talks which he had with Kobie Coetzee and with Fanny van der Merwe and with General Willemse and with Neil Barnard.
We bought Mandela the most modern suit that we could find and a paisley tie and a wonderful shirt, and we put it on. And because we would like him to be presentable when he went into Tynhuis meeting PW.
And he comes to me and he says, let's study Afrikaans. I said, what? Study Afrikaans? No way, no way. He says, Mac, in this war, if you want to understand the enemy, you've got to understand how they think. That is how you're going to work. That's how he made me study Afrikaans. It is that foresight that gave him the resilience, because he knew where he wanted to go, and that is the end of colonial rule.
They are here in the thousands, they are here in the tens of thousands. They shout, Die Mauer muss weg, the wall must go. The wall has suddenly become irrelevant.
The fall of the Berlin Wall opened for me and the National Party a window of opportunity to unban also the South African Communist Party. Because communism lost its threat. It was no longer the same threat which it used to be.
I wish to put it plainly that the government has taken a firm decision to release Mr. Mandela unconditionally.
It was such a pivotal moment for the country. It turned things around, and it also made, serious demands on the question of liberation.
Mr. Nelson Mandela will be released at the Victor Verster prison on Sunday, the 11th of February at about 3 p.m.
I greet you all in the name of peace, democracy, and freedom for all. I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people.
I am an activist. I was a student leader. We were part of a group of young people who started Fees Must Fall, which was a fight for accessible, free, decolonized education. But I've always been a person who, for the best and the worst of it, I can't turn a blind eye to injustice.
What led me to journalism is my desire to amplify people's voices. But during that work, I still felt like I was neglecting a huge part of myself. And I guess that's when I moved to the civil society space. I think as Abandaba Mnyama, we exist in community, and that is our strength. So I think organizing is just an extension of that. Understanding in Doba, there needs to be some collective goal, aim. There needs to be solidarity between one of us if we want to see change happen.
A few friends of mine and I gathered and we started a young professional women's movement, which we called Imbewu movement at the time. And it was meant to be a sacred space for young black and young female professionals to feel free, to feel normal, to ask questions, because we were asking ourselves questions. We were asking whether this was meant to feel as hard, complicated, and difficult as it started feeling. So we created a safe space.
Mandela's time in prison made up for a fair portion of his life. We all know this 27 years number. Too often we sort of skim over what those 27 years were like and what happened there. The fact that there was the isolation element from the family. His daughters were kids. And he came out, they were different people, they were adults. That has a significant effect on who you are as a person.
The first time I really met him then after his release was in April at the Grote Skuur conference.
This is the first time in 78 years that a truly serious meeting takes place between delegations of the African National Congress and the succession of white governors that have ruled our country for generations.
This is where the concept of CODESA was born.
De Klerk, I recognize what he did was a very big decision that he took, but he began not to have the conference to sort out the problem, because he announced the unbanning in February 1990. CODESA met for the first time in December 1991. 2 years later, he was dragging his feet. We had to force him to negotiate a way forward.
At the launch of CODESA, there was a big clash between Mr. Mandela and me. I was the last speaker, and I strongly accused the ANC of dragging its feet on security issues.
There is only one party sitting in this room with a private army and with arms caches, illegal arms caches, admitting to it.
Mr. Mandela became very cross and stood up and objected very strongly and insulted me quite strongly.
I am gravely concerned about the behavior of Mr. de Klerk. He has launched an attack on the African National Congress. Even the head of an illegitimate, discredited minority regime as his has certain moral standards to uphold. He has no excuse because he is a representative of a discredited regime not to uphold moral standards.
It took a lot of self-containment on my behalf, not to react very sharply too, because I had grounds on which I could have done.
What political organization would hand over its weapons to the same man who is regarded by the people as killing innocent people? As long as he's playing this double game, he must be clear that we are not going to cooperate with him on this matter. He can do what he likes.
When we talk about the CODESA moment, the negotiations had already taken place between the prisoner and his captive. And CODESA just becomes a ceremonial event.
From the lessons I've learned and seen in corporate, a copy model works, but it must be a copy model that can be localized and make sense for the people. So which nations were the examples that were used in thinking of some of the things that we were going to need? Because were we being geared up to survive a space and time, or to thrive as a global player, whether on the continent or, you know, worldwide?
There was recognition that the battle couldn't continue. That's why I think he went to the table with less than he even knew, that the white man even at the negotiation table had too much. But I think the real mistake he made was to put faith in the ethical frame of whiteness. He relied too much on that, and in that way he might have put his own people second as opposed to first, which he should have done.
I think if Mandela and co. had called for everyone to take up arms, I'm sure they would have. I don't think it's that. I think it's that when you become a leader, you're not accountable for yourself anymore. You have to display a particular level all the time. You have to always see the bigger picture. You have to play out scenarios 10, 15 times further than everybody else. You need to know better than everyone else, in that people are relying on you. And I experienced this during Fees Must Fall, everyone relying on you for the answers, and you're not always having the answers.
Throughout my life, especially as a politician, there are certain things which made my blood boil. But if you are a nation builder, if you want to contribute to the reconciliation which is so crucial in this country, you have to think not through your blood, but through your brains. I'm doing the same thing there.
Mandela's mistake was not going to be his alone. It had dire consequences. From the apartheid government for black-on-black violence, you're getting bits and pieces. If people remember Boy Potong, if you remember all of these different massacres, the assassination of Chris Hani, the country was not just on a knife's edge. People will recall Mandela going on national television, trying to keep people calm.
South African Communist Party Secretary-General Chris Hani is dead. He was assassinated at his Boksburg home this morning.
Chris Hani's assassination. On that day, I was certain that this is it. I mean, we had that euphoric moment. The prisoners are released, and, you know, there's the unbanning, and then there's the negotiations, and then this happens. I mean, I remember walking out on that day, and there wasn't a single soul outside. People were so wounded, and you knew that the minute they come out, blood was going to flow on the streets. But Mandela, knowing the role and significance of his, you know, the iconic status, he then put himself out there to actually, you know, sort of like, you know, be, you know, the body in between the two parts that were ready to go to war.
Chris Hani has made the supreme sacrifice. The greatest tribute we can pay to his life's work is to ensure that we win freedom for all our people.
I think that's something that was very unique, you know, to him, that he could come out and call out all of us. Even us who were angry and wounded and grieving, you know, you knew that, okay, Tata has spoken now. We need to restrain ourselves. There's still an election that we have to go through. And if we didn't have someone like Mandela then, I don't know where we would be. I think we would have had, I don't even think a civil war. It could have been a genocide, much like what was happening in Rwanda, you know, around those times.
Nelson Mandela became such an icon of high political morals and really admired all over the world. It also contributed to his greatness that he sat down with his former enemy and made the necessary decisions, ensuring, in cooperation with his former enemy, a peaceful transition in South Africa.
The values of Mandela is really global. It still resonates within Norwegian society. He's such an important figure for many, many Norwegians.
And very much inspired by Nelson Mandela, we have invented this concept of dialogue at the Peace Center. And actually what I'm sitting at here is a bench inspired also by Nelson Mandela. It's called The Best Weapon, inspired by his quote, "The best weapon is to sit down and talk." So as you can see, the style of this bench is so that the gravity will put people together so that you end up sitting together and talking. We think that dialogue is something that we need to master better in our world today. The story of a man being in prison for 27 years and coming out with the purpose of uniting, creating peace and prosperity in a country is so touching. And the way that he led by example is something that is really inspiring for us all.
Kuthiwa amadoda okuqala enikwe igunya. Kuthiwa amadoda okuqala enikwe igunya lokuprofeta. Ndiyathandaza olhlobo. Ya ndiyathandaza. Andithandazi phofu ndiyanqula. Yabo.
Nobel Peace Prize institution in an African context represents conformity and defeat. When you conform and when you have been defeated and then you conformed. Remember what Fanon says. Fanon says, even the people, the politician, those who left and had their tongues ironed out and their attitude, came in and speaking the language of the former master. And they were given grandeur and honored and given medals. And after that, their tongues were flapping the colonial jargon and speak on behalf of the master. And you are taken and be gallivanted and be canonized amongst your own people as someone who's infected by this heroic syndrome with white validity. That's a defeat and conformity.
When we think about the institution like the Nobel, on theory, it's a good practice. But you have people who are outside your reality telling you, firstly, who your heroes are and appointing people whom some of us may even consider as problematic figures and honoring them. For me, it speaks to how efficient and consistent white supremacy is, because it also wants to choose for you whom you should hold up high and whom you should reject.
The Nobel as an institute is very elitist. And what's interesting about the Peace Prize is that it's always awarded to people that come from locations such as ours, troubled locations, African locations, you know, where blackness is or brown people are, and the struggle for their liberation.
Norsk Nobelkomité har bestemt at Nobels fredspris for 1993 skal tildeles Nelson Mandela og Frederick Wilhelm de Klerk.
My position has always been clear. I am not going to interfere with the decision of the Nobel Peace Committee. In their wisdom, they have decided to give this award jointly to the two of us. And whatever criticisms I have against Mr. de Klerk, and I have a lot of them, but he has made a contribution which must be acknowledged. Without him, it would have, as the head of the government, however illegitimate and discredited that government is, but it would have been impossible for us to be able to make this progress without the cooperation of the government of the country.
What the Nobel Peace Prize meant to Dr. Nelson Mandela, the cause and his people, I really believe it was a point in history that cemented everything that him and his people, you know, strive towards. I really believe it just put the stamp of global approval to congratulate him and the movement for the work that they've done. A pat on the back for an immense achievement.
I think Nelson Mandela is a very worthy recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. I think he acted with the best intentions at the time.
Dad, did you ever want to be turned into an idol? Into streets and statues to hide your flaws and faults? How tired you must have been when freedom finally crawled into the gray of your eyes. At times like this, I reach for the human in you, not the freedom fighter or the nation builder or the Nobel Peace Prize winner, but a grandfather with knuckles calloused enough that his children would finally find their peace. You have left us with a revolution of our own becoming. Armed with release and surrender, we march into a future that is only just now beginning. And for all your imperfections, we remember that the legacy is fertile, is soft and lush, and waiting for hands to harvest what we must reap. And maybe the rainbow was a promise that after all the rains, we would all have enough fruit to eat.
When they then bring in Mandela and they give a joint reward to Mandela and de Klerk, for us, it said that Mandela had sort of attained a certain status because he's now receiving an award that put with the white man. And the liberals amongst, us would celebrate that. But the radicals would actually see both the colonized and the colonizer are given an award for peace. They would look at that and see problems.
My thing about idolizing Umdu is that you take away Ubuntu bag, the fact that they are a person, and our ability to see them as human. Ne? My issue with idolizing people is that it erases the masses that were essential in bringing about change. And I think that is a huge failure for the future generations, because for real change to happen, people need to realize their power, and it is the people's power that effects change. It is not individuals.
This is the kind of political pageantry that you expect of the world. There are even more radical traditions in terms of far-left socialist positions, or even the Black consciousness movement. Now, those people don't get awarded those kind of prizes because perhaps their style of politics is not palatable.
The reason why Hani was not given that, the reason why Steve Biko was not given that, the reason why Nkgopotse Tiro was not given that, it is because they refuse to conform.
Projects such as these, I think, exist to confuse us. They don't want us to see that the same hand that is responsible for rewarding our so-called heroes is the same hand that is responsible for murdering people who demand what is due to them.
So when a white man gives you something that is hanging on your neck and galavant you and canonize you in the township with foreign shirts with foreign names, then you need to understand what that means. It means that they are still under the yoke.
I am indeed humbled to be standing here today to receive this year's Nobel Peace Prize. I extend my heartfelt thanks to the Norwegian Nobel Committee for elevating us to the status of a Nobel Peace Prize winner.
For the committee, the obvious candidate was Nelson Mandela. There is no doubt about that. And the decision to have them share the prize was criticized, as very often happens. I don't think that there would have been much criticism if Mandela had stood there alone. I don't think there would have been a universal cry, where is de Klerk? But in the committee's reflection and wisdom, this is what they wanted to do.
Have an issue with bodies that exist to award but not intervene when there's crisis. Like, you're going to come and award for the supposed resolving of crisis, but you're absent when there's crisis. But if they come in with a nice little medal when the crisis is solved, why do you exist?
For me, the question is, had we taken the land by whatever means, revolutionary means, bloodshed and whatnot, would there be anyone today who would come and say, look, we recognize that you restored your humanity, you took back your dignity, here's a Nobel Peace Prize? It wouldn't happen.
I had the privilege of working with him in 1994 as part of the election team for the ANC at that time. And I do remember from my own experience, a very compassionate man, very concerned about the basic needs of the average, the poorest black person in this country.
The systematic massacre of our people in order to uphold minority rule. And now the violence that is presented as a black-on-black violence, where innocent people, including women, the aged and children, are being slaughtered, with the police doing very little to stop the carnage. These are the most regrettable moments.
After going to vote in 1994, we became people who are now accustomed to the leaders that we've voted for. We were robbed without understanding that the leaders in which we have voted for are people who will see their version of manhood in the shadow of their former masters. That, now it's the time when the freedom is dishonored by paper.
The most important issue for the National Party was that we should become a constitutional state, in which there would be a constitution, which would be the highest law of the land.
Today, I speak not as an accused, but on behalf of the people of South Africa, to inaugurate a court South Africa has never had, a court on which hinges the future of our democracy.
When the Constitution is born and property clause is not tampered with, then I think that decision becomes visible. And because of that, people who are in the media then begin to celebrate South Africa, not only as this nation that gave birth to a miracle democracy, but they celebrate South Africa as a nation that has one of the best constitutions in the world, because wow, you had just oppressed these people for 400 years, you had killed them, you had named them, but here you are, still owning the land. And over and above that, you are protected.
Our constitution is quite unique compared to other constitutions in the world. Many countries trying to look at, the constitution-making process to learn from it. How do you pay attention to human rights? How do you pay attention to all the freedoms that we have? I mean, you can look at any country, even in our neighborhood, our neighboring countries. Citizens don't have the freedoms that South Africans have. But it doesn't mean that the constitution is perfect. It has to be tested. It has moments where it's not ideal and it does not serve the majority.
As a young, South African who, has really high regard and hopes and loves her country dearly, a lot of, thought has gone in, a lot of praise globally, and yet not much from the implementation side. We really have failed when it comes to actualizing what our constitution has set out to achieve.
And if indeed it's the best constitution in the world, why has no one adopted the South African constitution in their own countries as a model that promotes reconciliation, justice, peace, all these ideals that we are told Mandela fought for? What happened in South Africa was not a compromise. We were completely defeated and outsmarted, and it was endorsed by the Constitution.
Some of the things, when I started reflecting being on the corporate journey were around, why am I not seeing people that look like me?
We had not thought through the process of economic transformation.
Can you explain the intentions behind the nationalization philosophy?
I'm sorry, I regret to note that influential circles amongst whites in the country and abroad are agitated about our demand for nationalization, not of the entire economy, but of certain sectors which we regard as being important to, insofar as the economy of the country.
I think the Davos moment is a critical moment, and it is certainly a sell-out moment for the ANC, where the interests of black liberation were sacrificed on the altar of Western interests.
Is the ANC still committed to nationalizing major industries?
We would like to create sufficient conditions for investors to invest without any fear of their properties being nationalized, their profits being repatriated, and getting a safe return on their investment. That is the intention.
When you open your door to your house knowing there's danger, not letting your kids to go and play, but allowing the enemy inside, and you know the damage that he's gonna do, meaning how will they sodomize your family, how will they take from the family, how will they take and eat from the family, how will the damage that you are very much aware. But as long as they give you some incentives, crumbs.
I attended this conference at Davos, in which there were more than 2,000 major industrial leaders of the world, academics and politicians, heads of states, heads of government. Their hostility towards nationalization, you could cut it with a knife. And it became clear to me and my delegates, we were not able to persuade the industrial leaders who were gathered there. We were unable to persuade them that nationalization is no threat to their investment. And this is a question of concern because we want investments. We are demanding the installation of an interim government. And in our view, the first task of that interim government would be to lift sanctions and to make sure that investments come into our country.
Is there something that we could have done then that could have avoided the present? There are obvious things that people say, yeah, we should have insisted more on reparations. We should have insisted that the land should be given to people. We shouldn't have, maybe we shouldn't have agreed to the sunset clauses, etc., etc. That's theoretical in a sense, because I really don't know how you then go back and repair that. But when you say that we could have avoided this moment that we're facing, this moment is unavoidable, this one, because this is the moment when the politics of our country changes from being black people fighting apartheid to people fighting inequality and oppression.
What we should be talking about is repatriation. And you can't do that thing with rainbow, the Rainbow Nation conception. You can't do it with, singing Nkosi Sigalela and doing braais with white people. You have to do it at very serious levels.
I think the whole Rainbow Nation agenda, as a kid who grew up in South Africa, I remember that being drummed into us as often as possible. Like, looking back, I'm like, every little chance they got to say Rainbow Nation, they took it and they were like, we're going to run with it. One thing about you guys, you're a Rainbow Nation. And you know what? One thing about them, they succeeded for a while.
We are a new nation, motivated and very strong, with a bright future. Together, let us build that bright future. Masakana.
There is a Mandela in this universe who was very radical and who truly spoke truth to power and who fought and who had to sacrifice his family and so many different things. The idea that they were truly willing to die for something so much bigger. And that's part of his history we truly need to acknowledge.
People, particularly black folk, for some reason have surrendered their capacity to make change and have given that to politicians, which is why Nelson Mandela as a convenient scapegoat. If you think about the amount of money that has been squandered, if you think about the number of political faux pas that have happened in your lifetime, if you think about the total neglect of democratic rights, hard-won democratic rights for ordinary people, and the citizens have not stood up to do anything about it, but the punchline will be, but Abu Mandela was taking silly. To surrender our capacity to actually move that freedom struggle forward, simply because we have a theory that says one guy was taken out of jail, he signed a piece of paper and sold all you lot. That is the worst analysis I've ever had. Fighting forefathers and fighting ghosts is a good thing, but it doesn't actually change the politics of today.